All right, so with that, good evening and welcome to the Town Board of the Town of Asean work session for Tuesday, January 19th, 2021. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance and then remain standing for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We're marking a moment of silence tonight in conjunction with the nationwide COVID-19 memorial President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris held this evening just at sunset in Washington on the eve of their inauguration. This week marks 400,000 Americans who have died of COVID-19 since the pandemic began, just around this time last year. This pandemic has been tragic for so many of us, my family included, and it is important to properly mourn the unimaginable level of loss we've experienced as a country. We join with our fellow citizens across the nation tonight, remembering those we have lost and look to what will hopefully be better months ahead of recovery. Thank you. I'm going to start with some announcements. Yesterday, town offices were closed in recognition of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, which marked what would have been Dr. King's 92nd birthday. This day is always humbling as we all pause to remember Dr. King's remarkable legacy and honor his memory through service. One of the more eye-opening facts that I was reminded of yesterday is both Dr. King and Anne Frank would be celebrating their 92nd birthdays in 2021 if they had not been senselessly murdered. This is a stark reminder that the civil rights era and the Holocaust occurred not that long ago, and it is not hard to imagine that we could be living in a world where both of these remarkable figures are with us in person today. We should use this as an opportunity to reflect on our progress and understand that the inequities Dr. King sought to remedy are not distant memories. In fact, many are still very present in the lives of too many today, as are the horrors Anne Frank suffered in Amsterdam at the hands of the Nazi regime. But we all must try day in and day out to do what is in our power to make our community, our country, and our world a little better for those who may not share our skin color, our first language, our God, for those who struggle to put food on the table, a roof over their heads, or experience any other barriers to survive and thrive. As Dr. King reminded us, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. I hope all of us can take these words to heart this year and strive to do better in the year ahead. Tomorrow is Inauguration Day, when Joe Biden will be sworn in as the 46th President of the United States. This peaceful transition of power is an historic democratic tradition, and as Americans, we look forward to the special occasion. The theme for the Biden-Harris inauguration is America United. The inauguration will air starting at 11:30 a.m. with the swearing-in ceremony at noon. I would like to take a moment to remind people that none of us should gather together to view the event. Crowds of any nature create a risk we do not need to take, especially as this new, more contagious strain of the virus makes its way here. Please continue to protect your friends, family, and colleagues by making smart decisions. We also know law enforcement agencies across the country are on high alert in response to potential threats of domestic terrorism on Inauguration Day. Both Westchester County and Asean Police are on high alert and will remain vigilant to ensure the day remains peaceful. We have our police chief here tonight, Kevin Sylvester, so perhaps he can touch on this in his report. We are not necessarily expecting anything to occur in our community here in Asean. However, I know law enforcement stands at the ready. The days since January 6th have been unsettling, but I am encouraged by the response from federal and local law enforcement to quell these threats, and I pray that tomorrow will go off smoothly. With this in mind, we also received some disappointing news late last week regarding vaccines. The number of vaccines that are distributed to each state is a decision made by the federal government, and the number of doses coming to New York is expected to decrease in an upcoming shipment. We do not know what this means for people with appointments scheduled to get the vaccine. I know this is an upsetting development. Many of our residents over 65 have been so scared and isolated for months. Healthcare workers have been on the front lines since February. Unfortunately, we must all once again be patient. Governor Cuomo has made an inquiry directly to Pfizer to request additional doses for New York to buy directly. The incoming Biden administration will surely be asked to intervene as well. However, we do not know what the outcome will be. So again, we ask for patience. There is also some hope that Johnson & Johnson will be the third manufacturer to have another vaccine on the market. We're all hoping for this to be over very soon. Please remember that the nurses, doctors, and healthcare professionals are in an impossible position and are trying their best. Locally, we have a lot of testing options available to residents. Get tested if you are interacting with people outside of your household. The Austin Community Center was offering tests every Friday in January, but this has been shifted to Sundays. The tests available through the community center are being administered by Westchester Medical Center. Star of Bethlehem Church is offering testing on Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. You can register on their website, starbethbc.org. Residents can also use the New York State website feature called Find a Test Near You, or Find a Test Site Near You, to help residents schedule appointments at Open Door, CVS, HealthSmart, and many other local sites. The second half of 2020-2021 school tax bills are due by January 31st, 2021, but since that is a Sunday, payment can be made by February 1st without penalty. We strongly encourage taxpayers to pay online through the Express Pay option on our website. You can also pay by mail or drop off your envelope with a stamp at the dedicated tax office mail slot at the Austin Post Office. If you'd like to pay in person, you're welcome to come to our building at 16 Croton Avenue in Austin during our public office hours, 9 a.m. to 2:30 p.m., Monday through Friday. The tax receiver's office is ready to assist you if you have any questions about your bill. Tax receiver Holly Perlowitz and her staff are very helpful. If you have any questions, you can call the tax office at 914-762-8790 or send an email to taxreceiver@townofaustin.com. Also have one other special item to mention. We had gotten a request from Nilakshi Matra, who's a resident of Austin, to offer a proclamation in honor and recognition of the Health for Humanity Yogathon, which is taking place this week. HSS is organizing its annual Health for Humanity Yogathon with the goal of having 100 individual participants cumulatively complete 11,000 repetitions of Surya Namaskara to promote the spiritual, mental, and physical well-being of all members of the community. And yes, Maddie, I know you know that that means sun salutation. She has, this resident of Austin has helped organize sun salutations every year in the Austin schools, and we are grateful for that acknowledgement, and we hope that those who would like to will participate. So just wanted to make that mention. Is there anybody on the board who has anything else to add for announcements? Okay, so hearing none, I want to move into our work session agenda for this evening. We are going to start with a department, I'm sorry. Oh, Councilman Wiltshire, hi, how are you? We have up first our police chief, Kevin Sylvester. It's all yours. The stage is yours.
Good evening. So typically when I come in January, we try to do sort of an end of the year report. I'm going to hold off on that for now, and I'll give my reason for that in just a moment. First, I'll just touch back on what you mentioned about tomorrow being Inauguration Day. We've had meetings over the last week or so with all of our partner agencies around the county. There is no report that anybody's received indicating that there's a threat of violence or other reason to be worried. That said, our officers have been instructed to do additional patrols, not only around municipal facilities, but we'll be in the schools extra heavy tomorrow. Over the course of the past few weeks, we've had some challenging issues in the area of Park School. Parents are, with good reason, concerned for their students. So we'll be seeing extra heavy around the schools tomorrow, which is always a good opportunity for us just to get some face time with our students, a little bit of fun for us and making sure people are safe. In terms of an annual report, right now I'm working on a fairly massive research project that we plan to drop in the next couple of weeks, which will publish all of our arrest data for 2020. And it'll be a standard issue going forward, which will show demographics for every single person arrested and offer a comparison between. And it'll offer comparison between age, race, gender, ethnicity, a whole bunch of different stuff to give people a really clear picture of crime in Ossining, the activity of the Ossining Police Department, how these things are initiated, and how they conclude. So everything from the reason for dispatch to how the whether defendants' worship appearance tickets are held custodially, whether the reports were received as the result of a community complaint or if it's officer-initiated activity, everything up to and including whether they made it to a first appearance on that date or if they were brought back at a later date. The issue of bail is something that's typically held for the court, so if they may choose to publish something through New York State later on, but that's the only phase of the arrest that will be left out of that report. So I look forward to sharing that report with the town board in just a few weeks. We'll send that out to everybody once it's completed before publication. And our other big thing for this quarter is the big drop of our new Facebook page. So we've got yet another social media account that we've started now, this one called Policia de Ossining, which is a fully Spanish language Facebook page managed by Detective Jeff Chavez. So he'll be running that page, but with a lot of cooperation from all of our Spanish speaking officers. We have 7 or 8 fully fluent Spanish speakers in our department, and each of them will be contributing in their own way. But that page will not be a direct mirror of the main page that a different team runs. This one going to be directly targeting issues that Detective Chavez deems important to the Hispanic community. He's working with a couple of different Hispanic parent groups in Ossining to try and tailor that message to folks that sometimes are most reluctant to engage with our police department. So seeking to increase public safety through awareness and through education. We'll be doing a lot of work on that page this year, still maintaining our Facebook page and 2 Twitter feeds and Instagram and Nextdoor. Snapchat flopped. Nobody liked it, so that's out. And you can still subscribe to Nixle by texting 10562 to 88877 for emergency alerts for things like road closures and other in-the-moment type news. So that's what the police department's got going on for now, and I'll take questions for whatever you've got.
I'm muted. Do any of my colleagues have any questions for the chief? Any comments?
Dana?
Yes. Go ahead.
It's Northern. I just want to apologize for being late, but I'm here.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman. You're all's good. We're hearing a little noise in the background, but it's all good. Do you have any questions for the chief? Or
No. I was just listening.
No problem. We got you.
Thanks, Kevin, for all that you and your officers do. I'm very excited about the new Facebook page. I'm excited to see how that works out.
It's taken off quickly. We're hoping to engage with a whole different group that maybe didn't have the opportunity to follow along with the other stuff. The biggest thing we heard was that, the stuff people like most is sometimes kind of the silliest things, and it's giving weather reports and letting people know how the roads are. And the truth is, social media, most of those platforms will translate things for you when it's in writing, but this type stuff doesn't get out. And even if people can sort of piece the words together, they really don't get the nuance of the spoken word. So this will give an opportunity for a message that's directly related to people that people can really pick up. So that's what we're hoping to really get out of this, and sort of give people that personalized messaging.
Great. Thank you.
Anything else? I just wanted to add my congratulations. I think the page looks great, and I have seen a lot of the feedback, and it seems really positive. So thanks again for doing that. And also, I know obviously the village is in the process of the police reform and reinvention, and I know that your department has also been involved in that. I don't know if you wanted to say anything about that. I know it's not your report, but you do have some involvement. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's a committee that's put together, and there's a number of subcommittees, and I'm not on all of those. So they're putting together what their recommendations will be, and I don't want to spoil the surprise. So, what it appears is that there's going to be a number of recommendations made, and then those will be up for public discussion. So I know that the village has it on their website, or some of it may still be pending update, but coming soon. And there should be a number of public hearings coming up where people have an opportunity to review those recommendations and then have some discussion and other recommendations that may come from people that weren't on the committee. So lots of opportunity for feedback. I will share with this group what I say to that group all the time, is that the real work doesn't begin until this process is over. The process of making recommendations is really one whereby people kick in ideas. The real work goes on indefinitely when this is over, where we implement things, evaluate their usefulness as they're rolled out, and then adjust course as necessary. So, a lot of places are looking at police reform as a finite period where there's an exercise to be gone through, some changes are made, and we stop. My vision of law enforcement is much more fluid in the sense that even if we come up with really great ideas here, it's not the end, it's the beginning. It's just another opportunity for us to try and find better ways to do things we do poorly, and even better ways to do things that we do well.
1 minute is enough.
I think Northern just cut me off.
No, I think it was something
I'm
about
sorry.
getting a little bit more coffee in just 1 minute. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
sorry about that.
No, it's all right. I'm only teasing.
And Councilwoman Shaw, did you have anything that you wanted to add as our liaison from the board to the task force?
To what the chief was saying, there are subcommittees or subgroups working on different things, working through different ideas, working on what might work, what could work. We have like a best case scenario of what could happen in what time frame, and that's what we're working through now. And again, as the chief said, it's an ongoing process. So I don't want to spoil anything either. So that's all I'll say for now.
All right. Well, we're very appreciative of all work that is going on in the village, and certainly appreciative of your time. So thank you for that. And I guess that's it for you, Chief. So you're off the hook because we're moving into a fun discussion coming up next. And that is about the Village of Asean water properties and the proposed water intermunicipal agreement terms between the town and the Village of Asean. And for this, we have our friends from the village. You may look familiar to you. Very familiar faces to the town, Village Manager Karen DeTore and Assistant Village Manager Maddie Zahach. They're here tonight to discuss two proposed changes to the town and village's relationship when it comes to water. The proposed exemption of village-owned water properties from the tax rolls and revised terms to the water IMA to move the unincorporated town towards an equalization of rates with the village, a project that has been in the works for some years now. I won't steal their thunder, but for some background, the village is planning one of their biggest capital projects, perhaps the biggest in their 200+ year history, the building of a new water treatment plant. Something else you probably didn't know is that the village pays taxes to the other taxing jurisdictions on property that they own, including properties relating to the water distribution system. That has not seemed to make a whole heck of a lot of sense for us for years now. In fact, the county exempted these properties a few years back. Now, before the construction begins and inflates the value of these properties on the roll for a short amount of time, because then they will depreciate, it makes sense for the other taxing jurisdictions to consider doing the same. On another note, we have been collectively trying to understand why town residents pay 1.5 times the water rate of village residents since the start of the town and village's IMA for the village to provide water to the town residents. We've taken the opportunity to look at this aspect of our relationship carefully as well to see if there is a path forward to move closer to equalization. Both town and village professional staff have spent a lot of time evaluating the pros and cons of these issues and considering how we can move forward thoughtfully. We're here tonight to discuss with the board what the village is proposing so we can have a point from which to move forward to next steps. I know Ms. DeTore and Ms. Zahach have already presented to the school district and library boards, and they are interested to hear where the town board stands on the issue of taking these shared utilities off the tax rolls, so all the remaining taxing jurisdictions can move forward together to maximize the benefit to both water ratepayers and taxpayers. And with that lengthy introduction, I turn it over to you. Village Manager.
Thank you, Supervisor Levenberg. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. As the supervisor said, this is a topic that we've been discussing for some time, and we are embarking on a incredibly ambitious and important capital improvement to our water treatment plant. As you know, we have more recently dealt with water issues of taste and odor that had to do from issues in the Croton Reservoir. We're addressing them. Longer term, though, we want to really make sure that we have the capacity, as well as not the capacity just for the water itself, but the capacity to treat water and do it effectively for everyone in the water district. It is our most precious and essential resource, and therefore this is something that is receiving tremendous amount of attention and planning. And tonight we have our Director of Public Works, Paul Feoli, and our Superintendent of Water, Andy Teese, to answer any technical questions you may have on the water plant itself. Getting back to the matter at hand, we have been talking for some time now about what it would look like to exempt the water properties. It's a unique situation where the village owns the water properties, but the water properties, there's 8 water properties, they exist in the town and they're taxed. So for each of the taxing entities, including the town, Maddie, maybe you want to put the presentation up. Can we share the screen?
Sorry, I'm in the office. I had a quick visitor. Give me just 1 second.
Yeah, you could go. No. All right. So we put together this presentation we will take you through, which I almost forgot about. So for each of the 3 taxing entities, the town, the school district, and the library, the impact, we looked at the impact of exemption on the tax rate, and we found it would be small, and it would allow the village to hold water rates down with reasonable increases. And as the supervisor said, Westchester County has already exempted these properties. It's not traditional that utility properties, public utilities, are taxed. But we really did want a firmer grasp of what exemption would mean. So what we found was that there is a real benefit, an all boats rise, if you will, and we'll take you through that in more detail with specific numbers to address that. So the taxing entities that were analyzed include the Town General Fund, the Town General, Village of Ossining, Village of Briarcliff, and the unincorporated town, which is the entire town, the town unincorporated, which is the unincorporated town only, the Ossining School District. Now, Ossining does include the Village of Ossining, Village of Briarcliff, the unincorporated town, Newcastle and Yorktown. Newcastle and Yorktown and Briarcliff are not in the water district, so we'll be talking about the impact on them as well. And we also looked at, we also took into account the library, and that's Village of Ossining, Village of Briarcliff Manor, unincorporated town, Newcastle and Yorktown as well. For the purposes of this discussions and creating a level playing field, all the information is based on the same house, which is a $375,000 house. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Maddie. We are going to start with the baseline of where we are right now. And Maddie's going to take you, and Dale Brennan, our treasurer, is here as well, to take you through the analysis that really determines what the impact of taxation is versus exemption, and what that does to the water rates and the taxes simultaneously.
Okay, good evening, Supervisor, Town Board. Nice to see everybody. So as Karen mentioned, And I believe, as the supervisor mentioned as well, this is a project we've been working on for some time. So when we first started this, we were looking at the 2019-2020 school year. So that's a little while ago. So we have updated it a bit since then, but not much. This is the year that we've kept as our baseline. So this is using calendar year data for the town of Ossining, and then the school year data for the schools and the library. So again, we're starting with 2019-2020 school year. The first thing that might pop out at you is looking at the blue line where you see the home value across the board. As the town board is more than familiar, Ossining is one of the only communities in Westchester to be assessing at full market value, which is why for all of the communities within the town of Ossining, these three, you're seeing the $375,000 number. If you look over to the right for Newcastle and Yorktown, you'll see that the property, it's still the same house, $375,000 on the market, but the way that you have to assess it for tax purposes due to their equalization rate, because they're not at full value, means that these numbers are going to look a bit different. So as we go forward, we're using the school warrant from that school year, 2019 to 2020. And you'll see, likewise, that school warrant is apportioned over the three communities. So the Ossining portion is the same for these three. Newcastle portion is lower, Yorktown portion is lower still. There are about a couple hundred properties in Yorktown and in Newcastle that are part of the Ossining School District. So their portion of the warrant is similar to their portion of the roll value. So it's much smaller. So you can see that in the line following. Obviously, Ossining has the lion's share of the value in the school district because all of our properties in Ossining are in the Ossining School District. And that's how we calculate our school tax rate. So the way that that is established is we take the warrant amount for that particular community and we divide it by the roll value in that community, and that's how we land on the tax rate. So again, it's uniform throughout the three Ossining areas, and then it's a little bit different in Newcastle and Yorktown. But as you can see, everyone's still paying the same amount in school taxes for that same house. Then we look at the village of Ossining and the unincorporated town who are members of this water system. The village of Ossining, we got this number from the treasurer's office. The average quarterly water bill for a village Ossining home is $474.20. You'll notice that in the unincorporated town, it's a little bit higher, and that's because unincorporated folks who get water from the village of Ossining pay 150% of what village residents pay. So you can see that extrapolated out here in the yellow. That's the water bill for an entire year. So again, this is our baseline scenario. The other ones won't take nearly this long to explain, but just to kind of give you an idea of where we start so you can see where we're headed. It's worth reiterating that right now we're looking at the school tax bill information, which is, as the town board is aware, the lion's share of a resident's tax bill. We usually use the number between 60 and 65% of what the average homeowner pays in taxes goes to the school district. The town general and unincorporated share are relatively minor in comparison, as would be the impact if the town gave exemption in the absence of the school doing the same. So this is really, to make a feasible financial argument really dependent on the school offering this exemption, but of course, we're asking that the town do so as well. So as you can see here, when we got into the spring of 2020, we were able to update the baseline condition to a degree. We got more current values from the town assessor's office. And so we were able to update the roll value just a bit here. So this is based on real numbers. What you'll notice, if I were to go backwards, is that the value in Newcastle and Yorktown has changed very little. Another benefit of having 100% full market value is that in Ossining, assessments are able to sort of shift based on the market. So when times are good, that value is going to go up. Not so good, it's going to go down. In communities where they don't have 100% assessment, that's not the case. The only time you're going to gain value on the roll is if a brand new house is built. The only way you're going to lose value is if something happens to that house, if it's destroyed by fire, if it's knocked down, something to that effect. That being said, these numbers are going to be frozen for the remainder of our presentation to give us an updated baseline. The only number that you're going to see change is this number in these 3 boxes, which is going to be a result of how we're sort of tweaking how we tax the water properties in order to fully develop each scenario going forward. But same as on the prior slide, you see your annual school tax bill is the same no matter what community you live in. But now because we've ticked up 1 year, water rates have increased just slightly. So you see this number has gone up as well. So now, as I said, we were doing this presentation initially in the spring for the school district and for the library. So we said, okay, if we flip the switch tomorrow and you guys exempted the water properties, what would the tax bill look like right away? So you see these numbers here. We've taken $6 million off. That's currently the amount on the tax rolls for all 8 water properties that are within the unincorporated town. So we basically just flipped the switch and said, okay, school, if you exempted these right away, here would be the impact. For the school district, it caused a $14 tax bill increase for each residential property. So again, having exempted it earlier this year, everybody in the school district would have paid $14 more. That's not per thousand assessed, that's a straight $14 for having given that exemption. All the other conditions, we just carried forward from the baseline scenario, except sort of adjusted them for time. So again, as the board is aware, all municipal entities are subject to a 2% tax cap. So not knowing what the school's warrant was at the time, we just increased what their prior year had been by 2%. And so that's how we got to this place. So now going forward, we're going to use this now updated idea to look at the time it was 5 years in the future, but now since we're a little behind, it's 4 years in the future. So we've carried that forward, a 2% increase to the levy, which is the amount of money raised in taxes towards the overall budget. So we've raised that 2% a year, again, aligned with the tax cap. No change in assessed value for any community. So we basically froze the town of Asean tax assessors numbers where they were, and then froze Newcastle and Yorktown as well. We're assuming in this scenario, no exemption of any water properties as they currently exist, and we didn't build a new water plant. So this is just basically a carry forward of exactly the condition we have today. And you'll see taxes went up just a little bit, as did the quarterly water bill. We base this on a 5% increase each year, so a cumulative about 20.5% over the baseline condition. So now going to scenario 2, or B, it's the same 4 years in the future, but now we've built the new water plant and no one decided to exempt it. So the village is paying full property tax to the town of Asean, to the school district, and to the library for a new water treatment plant. The number that we plugged in was $70 million for a new plant. It is yet unclear as to what that number is actually going to be, but this is a very high level estimate of what we're thinking, so as to better demonstrate the effect of keeping the property taxed. So as you can see, we added $70 million onto the roll for the Asean portion. Newcastle and Yorktown are unaffected because the properties are in Asean. And the result is slightly lower taxes for everybody in the school district. And again, this is because we've added $70 million onto the roll, which is then distributed. Part of the pie basically is shifted to a new entity, which makes everybody else's slice smaller, to $175 worth in a year. The problem is now the village is paying increased taxes because we used to be paying on $6 million, now we're paying on $70 million. As a result, water rates must go up because that is how we're going to be able to fund operations of the plant. So you see these numbers have gone up markedly, 41.6% increase over 5 years, which is quite a bit. The water bill will go up about $400 per household annually, which is pretty sizable. So you would basically be getting $175 in one pocket, and then out of the other pocket, dropping $400. This is of particular concern to folks who live in the unincorporated area, because as I mentioned earlier, they're already paying 150% of what village residents are paying. So those increases stack up a little bit faster to their detriment. The last point I want to make about this is the $70 million plant is immediately going to be able to depreciate. An example that we use a lot would be if somebody like IBM decided they were going to come to town and build a $70 million facility. That would be amazing. Everyone would be super excited. $70 million would stay on the roll for a pretty considerable period of time, and the property may even appreciate, making that 70 million, 80 million, or 90 million over a span of years. Unfortunately, because this is a public utility and the way that the building has to be taxed, that $70 million is a quick sugar high, right? Everyone's going to get that $175 decrease, but that $70 million is going to drop pretty steadily. So you might get 75 in the first year, or I'm sorry, 175, then 140, then 100, and eventually everybody else's tax is going to have to go up to account for the depreciation of the plant. So it's really in nobody's interest. For that reason, and then also, as I mentioned, the water bill in Asean and the unincorporated town are going to go up dramatically.
One more point to that, if IBM did come, and that would be great, they would be investing the $70 million. In this case, it's the water ratepayers who are investing that money. So not only are they investing that money, they're then taxing their own investment. So it really is not analogous in any way, shape, or form to any entity coming in and delivering a rateable that has no impact on the school district. You also won't get the benefit of employees and other people who would shop and do things in the municipality. So we really want to delineate what this means as something that's being put on the tax rolls. It's not exactly what it appears to be.
And then just going to scenario C, which is sort of the ideal, the best of both worlds. The community is getting a new water treatment plant. It's going to be tax exempt because we're assuming in this scenario that the school, library, and town have all exempted it from taxes, which means taxes are going to go up as taxes do, a little bit a year in all of the taxing jurisdictions. And the water rate will only go up a little bit. Now, why would it go up at all, right, if we don't have any taxes on the water treatment plant? Well, the reason is we still have to borrow some money in order to fund that. So we're basically accounting for the debt service to repay that debt. And the water bill will go up about $32 annually, as opposed to what we were talking about earlier, about $400. The exchange for that is about a $15 increase per household. So you pay $15 more out of one pocket, but you're only paying $32 more out of the other pocket, as to what we saw before, which is you're getting a little bit back to spend a whole lot. So this is pretty much the best of both worlds. And again, this sort of assures our community an increased water quality and better control over our utilities. The thing that might come to mind for some of the folks sitting on the town board is that, well, what about the folks in Briarcliff, Newcastle, and Yorktown? They're getting a $15 increase, but they're not seeing any of the benefit. They don't get water from us. They're not seeing any benefit of a more controlled rate. They're just paying $15 more per household. The answer to that is yes, that's true. There's not really a whole heck of a lot that we can say to discount that. The point that I would make is that these folks are still in the Asean School District. And if water rates go up, that means they also go up for the school. So the school is going to be spending more money on water, which eventually is going to make its way into what they need to collect from folks in Briarcliff, Newcastle, and Yorktown via their taxes. Will it be as much as $15 a year? Maybe not. Will it be a little bit more? Could be, depends on how much water they're using. But we think $15 for a relatively smaller segment of the school district's population is not a whole heck of a lot to ask to provide the lion's share of the district with affordable water, which is a human right, right? So I'm going to turn it back over to Karen to sort of go over the summary high points.
Don't say it. I know, I'm muted. Thank you, Maddie. So as you can see, failure to exempt the water properties causes all tax bills to decrease somewhat, but it much more. So not really a gain for water rate payers there. The Village of Ossining residents, along with unincorporated town Ossining residents, will see dramatically higher water rates if the water plant is not exempt, and then the households with the at the lowest end of the value spectrum are going to have the greatest impact too, because remember, you know, your water rate is your water rate is your water rate. Water rate's regressive, so there's an impact there as well. Under any scenario, all taxing entities, this is important to know, get the same amount of tax dollars. And the budgets set by the various boards, the town, school, and library, are unchanged by any of these scenarios. The difference are the village would no longer be paying, and that share would be redistributed amongst the taxpayers in the taxing district. There would be a modest cost to taxpayers in their tax bills, which will but again, offset by the water bills. And the residents of Briarcliff, Newcastle, and Yorktown who fall into the school district will have a slight tax increase, but won't be impacted in a really adverse way from that. So the school and library costs may go up if their water charges increase, you know, as well. So that's another thing to consider. There's a savings there, and residents may end up paying more in their school and library taxes to compensate should exemption not be approved. So again, this really does create the best of all possible worlds, and there are no losers here. So when we're talking about equity and creating safer, more affordable water, a water source for the vast majority of people in the districts, we're asking that the town, the school, and library boards pass resolutions to exempt the water properties that are owned by the Village of Ossining in the town of Ossining. So I think we covered that. Are there any questions before I go into the next part? I just want to ask if there's any questions specific to the exemption. Okay.
I don't know. I'm not sure how you would know that. If any of the town board.
Yeah, if you want to just double.
I can't see
You want to?
everybody.
We
I
can
don't
just
know.
take the screen down for a moment, and then we can go forward to
Just for
talk
a
about
second,
the
just to
MOU portion.
Let's see that, just to see if there's some questions from the town board. Councilwoman Shaw, do you have a question? I don't know if you're unmuting. Okay.
I'm good.
You're good? Anybody have any questions? Okay, I mean, I appreciate the very clear explanation. At least I thought it was pretty clear, and hopefully others did as well.
Yeah. Having the supporting documentation helps as well.
Okay.
Okay,
So we'll go forward. If Maddie, if you want to put the presentation back on the screen, or Victoria, I'm not sure who's doing it, but all right. So if we go to the next slide, we also had talked about this in the past and more recently in the context of the intermunicipal agreement that the town and village have for the provision of water. And that agreement was drafted in 1968, which means it's older than some, not all of us, but some of us. And so one of the things that we know that the complete and total exemption of all 8 water properties outside of the village would help to keep water rates lower for all ratepayers. So this is the one thing. The current agreement is set where the town pays 50% more for its water than village ratepayers. We know if we maintain the tax the properties rather, that costs will go up fairly high rates for both town and village. If we want to work at working on a more equitable distribution of the water rate, the exemption really is key to that. It would be very hard to effectuate a good solution to this if we don't exempt the property. So next slide, please. So what we looked at a couple of different options. We evaluated this very carefully, and I really want to give a lot of recognition to the work that our treasurer did, and Dale Brennan, as well as our former treasurer, Tom Warren, in looking at what, we were unpacking almost 60 years of a way of doing things and trying to figure out a better way to do it going forward. And it's the first time that anybody's really done this. So in looking to ways that we could be fair about the provision of water, we looked at various scenarios with the goals of reestablishing rates paid by the unincorporated town residents fairly, and then also shielding village ratepayers from the abrupt and severe financial impact. So one of the reasons we want to exempt the plant is to make sure that we can maintain affordable water rates, particularly for water ratepayers who are at the lower end of the value spectrum. But we also, want to be fair with the town residents as well. So balancing that was really key to this discussion. And we also wanted to make sure that the cost borne to the village based on its ownership and operation of the facilities and the liability of carrying water fund debt are covered as well. So looking at all those options, we went through a fairly complex analysis, and we've given you the information on a variety of scenarios, which we won't go into too much detail here because it's cumbersome. But we looked at everything we looked at had some combination of a reduction of the 150% rate paid by unincorporated town residents, the use of water fund balance to lessen the impact of decreased revenue from the town ratepayers to the village ratepayers, and trying to keep an annual rate increase between 5 and 10%. Obviously, the lower we can keep that, the better. And across all scenarios, full tax exemption of the Indian Brook water treatment plant and water tanks and properties in service to water filtration and distribution is necessary. None of this works without the exemption. So we looked at various options. We got down to 8 options, and option 7 was the one that we felt did the best job of achieving all those goals. So in option 7, we're able to gradually reduce the water rate differential from 150% to 110% over 8 years, maintaining no more than a 5% rate increase for each year. And this scenario decreases the unincorporated town rate slowly over 8 years. It holds a firm 5% or less, hopefully less. So we will strive to make it less, increase steady for all water rate customers. This slower attempt, spreading it out over 8 years, does generate a budget surplus of $517,000 over the projected period. And that results in a nearly balanced budget by 2025, as opposed to the other scenarios we looked at, which did not generate a balanced budget and would have depleted our water fund balance over the course of several years. So moving to 110% allows the village to accommodate the continued sole administration of our water and also absorb liability of debt issued by the water fund. Additionally, it accounts for the higher investment per linear foot required to service the unincorporated town residents versus the village parcels. Because remember, for every linear foot of water infrastructure, you have many more ratepayers typically in a village parcel than you would, or in a village area than you would in the town. And there is a cost to that. There is an economy of scale here. So those are the things we looked at, and that's how we arrived at this. And we've given the board a lot of detailed information, but we're happy to answer questions on this as well. If you want to just So really a summary of next steps is full tax exemption. We really would hope that the town, the school district, and the library would all agree to tax exemption for the benefit of virtually everybody involved in this. We see that the full exemption has minor impact on non-water rate payers. So we do acknowledge there are some people who will not be getting water, but the impact on them is really not incredibly significant. This provides equitable and fair revision of the ability to have an equitable and fair revision of our long-standing IMA with the town, and we are committed to making that a reality. And the village requests that the town of Ossining agrees to exempt the water properties, and it supports our request to the other taxing entities, the school district and the library board. And we will, we will work with the town to gain agreement on a memorandum of understanding that recognizes that if the other taxing entities go along with the exemption, that we can go forward and revise the intermunicipal agreement based on what we've discussed this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, another clear and thorough explanation of a very, very complicated subject. And I think that you, again, explained it pretty clearly. It seems like, based on your presentation, that if we want to maintain water rates at a reasonable level and not see a huge spike, the best bet to achieve that would be to exempt the water properties. And because currently the unincorporated town pays 1.5 times the village, it would have a greater impact on town water rates if those properties weren't to be exempted. It has, whereas if you spread the reduction of the cost of the utility across all property taxpayers, it's a nominal amount, a nominal differential, and then you're able to maintain the water rate. So that's for the exemption. And then looking at that option 7, for the, again, just to summarize, it seems that the additional liability and debt that you carry for owning the water properties is the reason why we're looking at a transition to trying to equalize, but never really getting to 1-to-1, because you still have additional costs that you incur over what the town would, and that's why you're going to that 110. And the reason that it's to be spread out over time is so that, again, you don't see a huge jump in rates for village taxpayers to try to make up the difference. I mean, something that we did similarly a few years ago with the blessing of the state. I don't think we need that in this case, but when we went to a full value rule, and there were certain properties that were seeing a big jump in their value that had was a difference. So we spread that out, the payments out over 3 years to give taxpayers the chance to sort of catch up with the new value that had come on. So this is a similar approach over a longer period of time because of the greater impact that otherwise it would have on the village. So with that, and thank you again, I don't know if I summed it up, but that's just my sort of interpretation. I'll just open it up to the town board for questions, concerns, opinions, anything that you would like to offer.
So the memorandum of understanding assumes that we're going with scenario number 7 at the same time as we.
So here's the issue. Unless we achieve the full tax exemption, and it really is the school district because that is the lion's share of the tax. Unless we do that, we cannot commit to redesigning the IMA as equitably as we would otherwise like to do. It will just be very, very challenging because we'll have the added burden of those tax dollars to pay. the memorandum of understanding, which is based on really the intent that we have, that if all the taxing entities agree to exempt the property, we will then work with the town to redesign, revise the IMA. Since we can't do that now, because we need to make sure that, so this is really pledging our intent to do so. And one of the ways that we could do that is taking the intent and the design that we did on option 7 and using that as basically the template for a solution that would work going forward. Whether it would change from that during the IMA process, you know, things are always subject to change. However, we want to make sure that we are committing to an intent to do something in good faith. And this is really, given the sort of nature of how we have to get this done and putting the pieces in place the way we're recommending to do it.
Okay, how binding is that?
Nothing's binding, but what is binding is that the MOU is a memorandum of understanding.
I
It's
understand
a memorandum
that.
of intent. So, so here's the way to look at this. There is no value to the town to not exempt the properties. There's just none. Your town residents will pay more money in their water rate than they will. There's no tax benefit. So across the board, whether we did nothing with the IMA, town residents will still pay less for their water if the property is exempt than if it isn't. That's just across the board. So what we want to do though is we do think it's in the spirit of working together in a fair and equitable way to work on equalizing the rates or keeping the fair equalization differential. We outlined one way that could do that. That is one way that definitely we could write an IMA on. It could be subject for additional conversation. But you know, the reality is if we don't, there is no conversation that we can have that's going to be as constructive if we do not achieve getting full exemption for the properties.
So just to point one quick thing out, and sorry to interrupt Councilman Feldman, but I just wanted to mention that it's not completely accurate to say that this is unprecedented, where one municipality that owns property and another pays taxes to that municipality. And there are cases where there are you know, water plants that are located outside. However, what I think differentiates this from other municipalities is that it really is one water system. So in other words, the town and village are both in the same water system, which is, I think, different than in other municipalities. So having it be one water system, I think that's really what, you know, why there's so much question as to why it was established as, you know, 1.5 to 1 over, you know, in 1968. So I think that, you know, it's been our goal to try to figure out how we can extricate ourselves from that. And this is an opportunity by reducing the out-of-pocket to the water district by shifting, you know, basically taking them off the tax rolls. It then offers the opportunity and the timing to be able to start to shift back in the direction of what should look like one water property. And again, one water system, that's, you know, town village water system. Now we don't though take on the risk. So that's again where that extra 10% I think comes in. And I think why it makes sense to have the conversations together. I know that we've talked over time of, does it make sense to even have these two conversations in one? It's not like it's a quid pro quo. It just seems that it makes sense to do these two things together because one enables the other.
I do understand that. And I also understand that the difference in length between houses should account for the added percentage that the town outside pays. I agree with that. The added infrastructure is definitely worth something. I agree with that. I would just like to make sure we're working on them together.
Right, and I think that's the point that you were trying to make, and I think it's a good point, which is that I think if we're all under the understanding that we are working on these two things in parallel and in tandem, then we get it. But I think because it's an opportunity to fix one thing while we fix two things at once, we don't want to be left hanging. Feel that there's an opportunity for us to be left hanging. So we just want to make sure that MOU is binding. I think as Councilwoman Feldman was pointing out, so that we all know that we're going to get to this, and it's not going to be something that gets kicked down the road.
Right. So I didn't mean to misspeak. If we sign the MOU, it's binding. What I didn't want to infer is that we have things set in stone, or that option 7 is to the T the way we would have to set the MOU. So if that caused confusion, I apologize. The intent of the MOU would be to, would be binding to the degree an MOU is legally binding, but more importantly, it would reiterate our intent to work in good faith on this, because we're not able to do the IMA until we have the taxation. And it has been expressed to us, because we have presented this to the school board, that they are interested, one, in understanding what having transparent discussions about the new treatment plant, the provision of water, and agreements pertaining to that between the town and village. And I think that it would be very difficult to get the other taxing entities to agree to exemption if the town is not willing to do so. So because
Oh, sorry.
but the MOU, I didn't mean to say that the MOU isn't binding, and I sort of misspoke there, so I apologize.
Right. I do agree that the exemption makes sense. I just want to head that other issue as well.
Right. And anybody else? Any other?
As an unincorporated town resident, the water rate difference has always been a sticking point for the unincorporated town. So a plan that gets us closer to equalization is exciting to me. So I find this very interesting, and I look forward to see where this goes.
Well, it's going to go further if the town board is on board. So that is something that we're going to have to, just sort of get an understanding of where we, is this something that we want to pursue and work together on achieving an MOU, and work together on getting closer to those equalization rates, and work to exempt these properties. So, I think I kind of made all the arguments before, but just the benefits are lowering what ratepayers are going to pay, getting much closer to equalization, which has been, again, something that we've been working on for some time now and hoping to achieve. And this is an opportunity to do so. And again, making it just easier to move forward with what's really important, which is protecting our clean water supply. And we know, when that's not protected, that compromises all of our safety. And especially now when we're all dealing with safety issues, that's not a place that any of us want to be. And I don't know, I know we haven't really had an update, and we do have Andy Teese, water superintendent, here this evening. I'm not sure if, we're not looking for a long a long explanation, but if you wanted to give us a couple of words of maybe where you are in the process right now. And I'm pretty sure you're through the planning board phases. Just not exactly sure where you guys are, and anything else.
Sure. I just wanted to say, the point that you brought up about the taxing entity, Mount Kisco's water treatment plant is in Bedford. Bedford doesn't benefit from that at all, but there is a small charge that they do charge, and there's no benefit to Bedford. Newcastle's water treatment plant is in Newcastle. Peekskills is in Peekskill. So it's kind of a different situation here where, like you said, it's one water system. So I just wanted to reiterate that. The treatment plant itself, Paul and I had a meeting the other day with the health department, and it was the state health department that was on the call, and it was just finalizing the treatment plant design. A couple little tiny things need to be done because Everybody's aware that we had MIB issues in the water last year and taste and odor issues. So what we had to do was make some modifications on the design, which we have a proposal for that for the manager and for the board to approve if they wish to. And once that modification is done, it takes like 4 months once we execute that contract with Hayes and Sawyer. If we do so, then we submit that to the health department once more. And the health department is on board with these changes. It's not like they're surprised. But essentially what it requires is the powder activated carbon system to be installed in the new treatment plant. We're going to use the existing one and buy one more. And the UV system needs to be sized like 5 times larger to handle the MIB. So that's being worked on concurrently.
So does that, okay, so that's 4 months and then you have to go out to bid, or I mean, then you prepare documents and go out to
Correct. So we did an RFP for construction management services. That's due to the village engineer, Paul Frioli, on Friday by 12. There's like 4 or 5 firms interested. So that's for construction management. That'll be in place before we go out to bid. Paul, do you want to say anything?
Sorry, I missed the beginning of why you started talking, Andy, but I
just asked for a very quick update because we're talking about, I guess, why is it that we need this very large and expensive project for our water? And, we obviously know we want to protect our water, our clean water. So maybe just give us a.
I could do that part because, in fact, I have notes from the last meeting here, so I'm glad I have it. So we started the design of the new water treatment plant back in 2016. The current plant was designed for 4 million gallons a day, which was constructed in 1986. The last upgrade was 1940. We've extended the existing life of the plant by a lot of the upgrades for the last 35 years and the last 10 years. Chemical feed systems, making sure that everything stays in compliance with 10 state standards and the health department. The turbidities, the particle removals, everything that's required by the EPA and the health department has drastically changed in the last 30 years. We've rebuilt these systems. We've installed chemical feeds. We rebuilt the sedimentation basins. That was actually under Paul, and the upflow clarifiers and chain drives. Millions of dollars have been installed in the existing plant to keep us in compliance. Back in 2008, we totally replaced the filters from 1940. So we've increased the filter loading rate so that we can handle higher flow. We've replaced all the valves to the plant. So like the proactive stuff besides that, on the other side, which you guys know, we signed on to the New York City Water Demand Management Plan in 2016, which reduced our unaccounted for water from 30% to 18%. That was the toilet replacement program. That was the aggressive leak detection. In fact, we're using these protocols now. Right now, we have 250,000, in the last couple of days, 250,000 gallons per day has started to leak in the system. We can see it immediately. We call the leak detection company and we'll narrow it down to 1 or 2 leaks in the next week. It's like we have this data that we're using and we have a strong baseline of where we need to be. So why do we need the plant? The plant does not meet 10 state standards. What that means is over 4 MGD, over 4 million gallons a day, the filters weren't approved for that. The disinfection wasn't approved for that. So we've passed all of our samples. We've never had issues as far as that, but there's 10 state standards and there's best practices. So we need to stay within that realm. And the last thing I was going to say is we've operated above that 4 million gallons per day in the summertime. We've operated up to 5.2. And it's hard to stay in compliance up at those levels. The last thing is, the silver lining was that although the plant took 4 years to design, we've come across the MIB issues, the taste and odor issues, and we will be able to address these issues before we build a $35, $40 million plant, and then we could have had the issues later. So we had these upsets in New York City's water system. And if these upsets happened, after the design and after the build, it would have been really bad.
Andy, can I
yeah.
add one thing?
Go ahead.
So my shorter version of that, very detailed and thorough explanation, is that the DAF, dissolved air flotation technology, and if Andy said this 10 minutes ago when I wasn't on, I apologize. But the dissolved air flotation technology, which is going to be the main process stream that removes the contaminant particulate in the water, is really the state-of-the-art technology as far as potable water plants go these days. Right now, we're operating a settling basin, which is not really the optimal technology to remove the contaminants at the levels we're expected to remove them today versus the levels that we were expected to achieve for removal when the plant was first put online back in the 80s. So that's gonna, it's not only gonna be a more efficient plant with more efficient removals, but it'll be more accommodating for the removal requirements from the health department. As far as flows go, how Andy said he had a hard time keeping up 2 summers ago, or last summer when we were running over 5 million gallons through the plant, which is above our approved design, is something that as we go in the out years and some of the development that we do believe based on our comprehensive plan and our build out studies shows us is going to happen in the village and the town, we don't want to tax the plant like that. We want it to be oversized, and we want to run the plant at a reduced rate to its design approval, so we can have a plant that can last us for decades in the out years when we're completely built out with a technology that could take us that far as well, including the extra technologies for all these new contaminants that we're being hit with every other day. Regulatory agencies are not loosening their grip, they're tightening their grip. But that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing, because the smarter they get, the smarter we are forced to get. So meeting the comprehensive plan potential flows, predicted flows of 6 to 7 million gallons per day is why we're designing the plant that size today.
So there was one discrepancy. Andy, you described a $30 to $40 million plant, but we also talked about a $70 million plant. Can you explain
Well,
that?
I think that when we all sat down and Dale started to create her models with the manager's office, we really, and Dale, I'll say some things that I think we're in sync here. We really wanted the all-inclusive worst case scenario, so you could show the potential impact on either side. I think when Manager Dettori first started presenting it, or maybe Maddie, when she first started presenting the chart, said we're using 70 million because we wanted to see, the
reservoir too, the evaluation of the reservoir, I believe, was 25 million or 30.
Thank you. Yes.
So,
That's
it. So it's 40 million plus the 30, which was the 70.
Thank you, Andy.
For the 2020 assessment roll, we're up to 14 million in assessment. So additionally, in building the plant, you're gonna reach that 70 million.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for that.
We like to under promise and over deliver. That's what our new mantra is.
We like it. Okay, so I'm sorry, I did cut off my other board colleagues from additional questions, but maybe you have even more questions now, or maybe you don't.
And Dale, one thing, I think the reservoir was increased and under the reval because of us just completing all the dam and intake work too, right? And the spillway work, which was about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, we finished all that work. And, and that was the $6 million project.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
All right.
I do have another question after listening to Paul and Andy. You're saying you're building out to a 6 to 7 million gallon treatment plant. Can the sewage treatment plant at the other end handle that?
The sanitary plant right now, last time we had any involvement with them. I think they're way underflow right now. I don't think I think that's, and I'm shooting from the hip here, so don't hold me to this. I think that plant's designed for 10 mgd influent, and I think they run at about 3 to 4, with the exception of when they have inflow and infiltration issue during
Storms.
storm events, when most county wastewater plants are inundated, and that's why they typically have a primary treatment bypass permit, most of them from the DEC.
Okay, thank you.
And
Fine.
just keep this, it's a good question, and keep in mind, every time in the town and in the village there's a subdivision or there's something new that's created that's going to increase the sanitary flow into the collection system, they ask that same question. Does your system, can your system take this design? And every subdivision, after its approval locally, is sent out to the county health department for their review. So they see it as well. And they don't just rubber stamp it, they review the flow, and it goes to their health department, who reviews it for just that reason. So one of the things the county, I don't want to digress too much and bore you, but one of the things the county does to counter exactly what you're bringing up is they ask that municipalities, whenever you do a subdivision approval, and maybe Christy might want to expand if she's experienced this in other munis, what they ask the local muni to do in their planning board approval is to have the developer make a contribution or a project somewhere within that municipality contiguous to their project for to prevent inflow and infiltration into the sanitary line, to try to offset the increase with a decrease.
Okay. Makes sense. Thank you.
Further questions from my board colleagues? Okay, so I know that we're going to have more opportunities to discuss this. I wanted to just get a sense from the board. You've had a chance to review some of the backup, some of the different options, why we got to option 7, and some of the material that we sent you as in advance of this meeting. And again, I think having reviewed some of the options, it seems like that is the one that has the least and the best impact, I guess we could say, over the course of time. And theoretically raises all ships, as you said, Karen. And I think, again, something that maybe starts to get us to what we were hoping to achieve, which is not seeing crazy rate increases every year in our water bills as a result of this new plant coming online, and also starting to see unincorporated having a fairer rate that they're paying in general.
Correct.
So just a quick poll of the board. Are you thinking that this is a direction that we can move, that we should be moving, and like it? Can you give me any feedback?
I like it. I think we should continue to move forward with it.
Okay.
I agree.
Agreed.
So I agree.
Fantastic. And so we shall. That's wonderful. Thank you very much.
So just before we wrap up, I just want to give everybody a sense of timing and what the next steps are.
Ask that anyway. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
Okay.
jumping ahead. Sorry.
Yes.
I just we need to go back to the school board and the library board. We, as you know, we presented both of them. The school board had asked us to have these conversations with the town board. We are going to try to get on the school board calendar as soon as we can. Hopefully we can get on their February calendar. If we know that this is, I think being supportive of the exemption, is obviously the first step for the town. If we're directionally on board with working on the IMA, and we're in agreement with thinking thus far, we can do that subsequent to knowing that we have the exemption, but getting the MOU signed and everything, we can obviously we need resolutions and the ability to do that. But we would like to get to the school board. They're going to start their budget season very soon, and it gets, as you know, it's been a hectic year for the school district. So the sooner we can get on their calendar, the better. And then we'll reach out to the library board as well. So I just wanted to let you know that it seems to me that we're in a good position to do that based on where we are right now.
Great. And I would just say that what I think we need to do is just work a little bit more on the MOU. You had sent us a draft, and I think, we just want to make sure that that all feels good to us. And
That's fine.
We're going to work on that with Christy and Stuart. So, and then
would you then do a resolution do you want to pair the resolution for the exemption and the agreement on the MOU, or would the board be willing to look at the resolution for exemption earlier, depending on how long it takes to look at the MOU?
The MOU to be in place, because again, it is basically, like you said, it's kind of a handshake agreement that says we're all working on this together, and that's the plan. So I think, again, the MOU is like whatever, like a 1 or 2 page document that clarifies what we've talked about essentially, and that makes sure that we're all on the same page.
Okay, great. So you have the MOU. As soon as you get the comments back to us, we'll work with you on the MOU and then hopefully do this. But again, we'll move forward, and hopefully by the time we're at the school board, we would have resolved this on both boards with a resolution. So.
Okay, sounds great. All right. So
thank you all so much. It's great seeing you again.
Thank you.
Great to see you too, even though we're not in the room together, in Zoom room. So we very much appreciate the time that you've taken to explain everything to us. And I know that we have up next a few more topics to discuss with, at least with Andy and Paul, I think. I don't know if they're both staying on. I think they are. So we're going to keep them, and we'll let you go. And thank you again, Maddie and Karen both, for the very thorough and clear explanation. We really appreciate it. And all the hard work that went on. And thank you, Dale.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
With you and Tom.
Good night.
Nice to see everybody.
Yes.
Take care.
See everybody. Miss you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. All right, so finally, we are going to ask Paul and Andy to stick around for this departmental report. On the top of the list is actually not the water treatment plant, but McCarthy Drive Rehabilitation Project. I think we may also hear a little bit from Andy about our superintendent's cottage restoration at Dale Cemetery, although I don't know, because, oh no, you're still there, Andy. I think you moved around, so I lost track of you. And we also did receive a price quote most recently for McCarthy Drive from our engineers, Dolph Rotfeld, for construction administration. So we're hoping, Paul, that you can walk us through a little bit about where we are with the bid responses and the recommendation from our engineers to move forward with the low bidder for the McCarthy Drive project, which has been a number of years in the making. So I kind of flipped around, but McCarthy Drive and a couple other things you guys are on. Thank you.
Thank you. Andy, I'll talk about McCarthy first, then we get into the other stuff.
I only have one thing about the Dale Cemetery. So.
Okay.
So.
Do you want to go first? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'll go quick because I got to call the plant on one thing. But I'll be back and forth on the call.
Sorry, Paul.
So real quick, Dale Cemetery cottage, it's kind of slowed down because of the weather. The contractor's still waiting on the windows. Once the windows come in, they'll install them. The weather needs to get better for the stucco anyways and for the painting. But I was talking to Pete today. Couldn't be any happier with, the contractor that was picked. The only other thing I had was the 2 generators that the town board awarded for both sewer lift stations. We just need the authorized signature from your office, and then we're set to go. I'm going to set up the pre-construction meeting as soon as we get that.
All right, sounds good.
I'll be right back. Let me just make this. Thanks.
You have to admit you're going to be longer than that, Paul.
Just a little.
Okay.
All right. So the two things on the plate are to talk a little bit about the borrow from McCarthy Drive, and the subtopic to that is the additional borrow for the construction management and engineering services during construction. So the first thing is, I think most of you are familiar with the bid results, but if not, I'll just do a quick synopsis. The bid results were opened by the clerk on the 29th of December. And the apparent low bidder, which we're taking you for consideration of approval as the qualified low bidder, is Montesano Brothers. They're a Westchester County firm, and the engineer is familiar with them. They've never done work in the village in my tenure or in the town, as far as I know. But I have spoken to people who work with that firm, and references all check out. Their lump sum bid was $2.465 million. The one right after that was $2.934 million, and then 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.4, and then there was an outlier of 5.5 million bid. So it was relatively tight. We're happy with that number based on the end scope of the project that was included in the bid documents. And the engineer submitted a formal recommendation, and I think that was circulated to you all. But if not, the recommendation was to make the award to Montesano Brothers Incorporated for $2.465 million. There was work in that project that is for the village water main replacement that exists in McCarthy Drive. And the way the IMA is structured right now, the village needs to incur the cost of that replacement. So the recommendation is to award this for the full $2.4 million with a paid by the town, and then through the finance office, a reimbursement from the village for the $598,000 that the contractor has bid to perform the water main facet of that project will be reimbursed to the project. So ultimately, the town borrow will be 2.4 less the 598,000. The second component of the borrow was the construction management services, which there was another memo sent in that included a proposal for a not to exceed number of $150,800 for construction management, inspection, and engineering services during construction. It's anticipated that this project will last 6 months in the field. So there'll be some work up front, there'll be some closeout work, but the majority of the work is going to take place in that 6-month period. And that 6-month period is going to include a full-time site inspector to oversee the work taking place in McCarthy Drive. It's very similar in administration, and it's actually the same firm, but this firm was actually bought out by a larger engineering conglomerate. That's why the name's different. But this is the same firm that did the town's Old Albany Post Road work. And I'd like to think that was a very successful project. And coincidentally, it was also a dead end project for the street. So it's very similar in its nature. Old Albany Post Road was very complex. This is a little more straightforward, but this definitely has a lot more infrastructure component to it, including the full road reconstruction after what they're calling now the road is ripped out. So we're bringing that forth to you guys for consideration tonight as well. So it's the 2.4 million plus the 150,000 for the CM services for the complete borrow. I reviewed this with the finance department already. The borrow presented includes all of that cost plus some contingency should something happen in the field that we need to fund. We don't want to go back and ask to borrow more money. we have some contingency within the construction project already, but historically and successfully, we always include a little extra in the borrow just for that reason.
The bond resolution that will be coming before the town board next Tuesday is for $2,350,000. This just allows you to borrow that much. You don't have to borrow that much by the time we go out to the bond market. If we see the numbers coming in and we can adjust, then we only borrow for what we need. But you can never borrow more than you approve, so it's safer to have a little extra in there.
Okay. And we had discussed a little bit about how we've gotten a document from Dolph about the construction management for a lot less much earlier in the project. And we want to have an understanding, Paul, of why it had increased so much and what changed.
Okay, so a couple of years ago, I guess, I don't know the date on the original proposal, but I think it was like between 60 and 70,000. Does that sound right?
Not for this part of it. It was 15.
No, the original project proposal from Dolph.
Yes, that sounds about
Yeah,
right.
and it had a last task to it of $15,000 for site services, included site inspection and such, very similar to what this is including. However, this is including a full-time site presence, which is really the bulk of the cost. And it's something that I guess if I dove a little deeper with the engineer at the time in his proposal, I might have tried to ferret that out and maybe brought that to the town's board's attention a little sooner. So I'm sorry about that. But at the time, I really wasn't certain on the scope and the need for full-time presence, but that is clear to me now. And that's why I'm bringing it forth to present it now instead of having it for you a couple of years ago.
So it's absolutely necessary to have somebody full-time?
I think so, and based on the nature of this work, and I think that I know that the way this is written up, the way we've worked with them in the past, and the way we'll work with them on this, is that it'll be a not to exceed purchase order that we'll create for them in their contract, and I will be often on that job routinely, daily, to see what's going on, and if it gets to the point where that person is not needed on the site, or if we finish early, or if anything like that happens, or we're not reaching the billable limit on the contract, we just won't pay the full amount. We'll draw down on that as we go. I don't want to call this a worst case scenario, but this is the when I sat down with them to go through these details, this is the worst case scenario. If we have to be there every second of every day in the longest possible schedule on the project.
Right. It seemed like in the proposal, what they were the proposal, it had the hourly rate. So I'm assuming we'll be paying on an hourly basis with some relative frequency in accordance with what they're actually working. So. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, again, just can you give a little bit more explanation just so we have an understanding? We haven't undertaken a lot of these projects, and I mean, just, Dale Cemetery obviously is a much smaller job, but, we don't have anybody necessarily looking at that every single day. So again, just maybe you can explain why this job is different. I know that it's obviously a much larger job and a lot more components to it. Just to have an understanding of what it means to have that, whatever full-time surveillance or full-time oversight, I guess you could say.
Well, you're in a residential area in a right of way with, I think, 32 homes that are impacted. There's also going to be a large portion of that work that takes place on Stormy Town Road. So there's going to be a lot of coordination for that work. And yes, it is the contractor's responsibility to coordinate and set up all those traffic patterns and pay for any necessary police presence and such. but contractors on every job, regardless of how good the contractor is there to make money. And sometimes that leads to shortcuts. And you can't thwart those shortcuts if you're not there full time watching. And it'll also help the contractor coordinate and expedite. That's why we're comfortable on a $2.4 million project to have someone there full time.
Perfect example is North State Road. The amount of water breaks when that water main was put in 1960s, it was not being watched correctly. You know, we have 3 or 4 water main breaks on North State Road a year, and most of the time when we dig up the water main, whoever was the contractor and the lack of oversight back then, we have huge boulders that were thrown in there because it was off of other jobs. So like these jobs need to be watched very closely.
All righty. Anybody on the town board more questions about this?
It's kind of sad they need a babysitter. You'd think there'd be an honor system.
Overall, any questions about the overall project? I mean, I think that what's the nice part about this project is it actually is going to help some of the neighboring streets as well, I believe. So it's not just this street, but other, you know, it's going to improve the drainage for some of the other properties on the back end and on the sides, I think, both the neighboring roads. So I think that's also a nice benefit of this project, not to mention the fact that, again, this is identified as a town road some years back, and we have now just gotten to the point where we can treat it as such.
Yeah, I agree. And something here, a component of this project that's different than a lot of infrastructure projects that we do, where we'll work underground and then we'll backfill it, and the glory of all the work is really back under the ground, not to be seen. This, when we do the road restoration, there's going to be a lot of aesthetic improvements for that whole street drive that don't exist now. I think it's going to be a really nice benefit for not just those homes, but where Stormy Town has the interface there is going to look a lot nicer. It's good project. I'm excited about it.
Great. Well, we're excited to see it finally shaping up into a real thing. So, and in terms of timing, if all gets approved and we accept the low bid and we go out to bond, when are we planning to start?
I also talked about this with Dale. We can award once the referendum is approved, right? But we can't really make a. I'm sorry. We can award after the referendum, 30 days, right? But we don't have to wait for the entire estoppel period. But we do have to wait for the entire estoppel period to make the first payment, which typically won't happen until a couple of months after award anyway, because that's when they get all their paperwork in. And the only thing you'll see come in as under the first payment is typically mobilization and insurance, which contractors do pay up front, so they bill up front.
Okay, so, but we're expecting to start this in early spring, late winter, early spring. Is that the plan?
Yeah, I think so. Everything I just said is going to start to take place now in February and into March, and then see activity out there in April probably.
All right. And so, but we're going to have the bond resolution on for our next meeting. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Any other questions, town board? No? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anything else that you want to talk to us about besides those topics? Was there anything else you had lined up?
Not this evening, no.
All right. Well, that's
Thank you.
And
I will just throw out there while we have Dale on that in addition to the bond resolution for McCarthy Drive, there will be a bond resolution for the purchase of our electric bus. So both of those will be on the town board's agenda for next week.
right. And just as a reminder, we are getting reimbursement through the community development block grant for the electric bus for our senior program.
Correct.
And it takes at least 7 months once we issue a purchase order. So we're not going to see that vehicle until hopefully we can actually use it again to have people come to our program.
Correct.
That would be the hope. That would be the
Yes.
dream. Hope and the
And the
dream.
town board just approved the contract extension for that grant. So we know that we are in the clear to receive those funds and we have the bus, which will be exciting.
Exactly. All right, so lots of exciting things that we talked about tonight. I know that there's a planning board meeting tomorrow night. I just want to mention that many of our community members have been interested in the project, proposed project for the Stony Lodge property. So I think it's a work session as well for the planning board, and they'll be hearing the presentation. I do not think that there are any opportunities for public comment tomorrow night. But of course, the public is always welcome. And there will be plenty of other opportunities for the public to weigh in. And we will continue to carefully monitor the project. Much changed since the last time we saw it, and we'll look to see what it offers to the town. So with that, may I have a motion to adjourn to executive session for personnel, advice of counsel, and contracts? And
So move.
all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you all for your departmental reports, and for the village folk and village with town hats on for being here this evening. We look forward to seeing everybody Tuesday, January 26th at 7:30 p.m. for our regular meeting. And you are free to join us via Zoom or dial in by phone. Information for each meeting is posted on our website each Friday and included in my supervisor's update. And have a great night, everybody.